think sometimes, a lot of times when you're looking at an old school family business, you're like, I want to change everything. Then I said, look, I like this. If I create one Dr. Vaidyas, can I be the enabler to thousands of Dr. Vaidyas? Thousands. There's two ways to build a business. One is bootstrap, like my dad has all his life, never took money from anybody else, owns 100% equity in the company, builds the business for himself.
See, that's the thing, no? About like businesses, it's about the relationships that you build.
I need to learn how to work in India, live in India, do everything in India. And so if I want to come back to India, I might as well come back now.
Yeah.
You seem like you're more of an entrepreneur type. I want to go and work at some of our startups. And at that time, they connected me to Cred, to Bira, and to Car Dekho. And this is 2015 I'm talking about. And so sometimes as an entrepreneur, you have to actually detach yourself from that emotional connection and see what is best for the brand. If I love the brand, and I'm attached to the brand, I also love the success of the brand.
Hey everyone, this is Shruti. Welcome to my podcast, I'm Just Curious, where I talk of all things I'm curious about with the people I'm curious about and how they turn their passion into their profession. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to someone who revived his family's Ayurveda company and took it to acquisition. Arjun Vaidya of Dr. Vaidyas is now leading venture investing for World Invest through a new venture fund called V3 Ventures. Is now an active angel investor as well as involved in mentoring brands in India's startup ecosystem. I'm so thrilled to have Arjun Vaidya with me on the podcast today, and I cannot wait to learn about what makes a startup work. Hi Arjun, how are you?
So excited to be here, Shruti, and excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. Let's start from the beginning. So I always ask this to all my guests, just to get an idea of where their mind was when they were a child to what they're doing now. What did you want to become when you were growing up as a child? Like, what did you dream of? What
I think there were like maybe 4 different things I wanted to become. When I was really young, I wanted to be a pilot for a very short period of time.
Okay.
They ask you in like first grade, second grade, what do you want to be? So I wanted to be a pilot. Then I started playing cricket and I wanted to be a cricketer.
Okay.
While most of my friends liked to bat, I had a hand-eye coordination problem, and so I could only bowl.
Okay.
And I was the only guy who was bowling, but at that young age, nobody was bowling, so I was the only guy bowling. So I wanted to be a cricketer for some time until I realized when I went to the coaching academy that I don't have the talent, so it's not going to happen for me. Then for some period of time, I actually wanted to become a hotelier.
Okay,
like work in the space of hotels. There was this TV show about people working in hotels on Star One, which had come at that time. That was really interesting for me. So I wanted to work in hotels. That lasted for a little bit. And then I think by the time I got to college in the US, it was clear for me that I wanted to work in the world of brands. It just captivated my attention and mind frame that this plain t-shirt that I'm wearing today is probably selling for 4 or 5 times the price because of this bear on it, right? And that's the power of brands. And that sort of interested me. I did all my internships through college in brands. And then eventually I knew I wanted to be in the world of brands.
Right.
In some way, shape or form.
Right. So when you finally decided that you wanted to be involved into brands, but then how did you get about doing it? Like, what did you decide to pursue, and how did you finally decided that, okay, this is the path I'm going to take, this is the process I'm going to follow to reach where I want to be?
Yeah, so I went to a college in the US which was very liberal, very open, called Brown University. So I didn't actually study business. They didn't even have business as a major in that college. We took some business classes, some entrepreneurship classes. Actually, one of our classes on entrepreneurship, we had to start a business. So we started a business as well in college. It was an interesting business called Munch Card, where we lived on a campus which was like one in a smaller city. I wouldn't call it a town, it was a smaller city. But our campus was on the top of a hill, just outside the city center.
Right.
And so there were a few restaurants, maybe 20, 25 restaurants around our campus, maybe 30, 40 if you went a little bit far, right? Now, most of the kids were on meal plan, ate in the dining halls, right? And the food wasn't great in the dining halls. But if you sort of took a meal plan, the average would be about $7 a meal. Right, and then
each meal.
If you took the meal plan from the college, but the food was okay, not so great. And then if you went to these restaurants, average meal would be about $12, $13. Right? There was a $5 gap between a restaurant and a meal plan.
Right.
So what we started thinking is, if the gap between the restaurant and the meal plan can be reduced to a 20%, 25% difference, the quality of food in the restaurant is so much better that students wouldn't mind spending 20%, 15% extra. And so we did this kind of business. We tied up with all the restaurants. We said, look, we'll give you a hook to be able to get more student traffic. Anyways, there are only students around, right? So they're together business from students. So we'll get you more student traffic for that, you give our students more of a discount, which was through this card, where students had to prepay or preload their money and then pay with this card. And we will make money like a credit card company. On every transaction, we'll make a fee.
Yeah, right.
With this, we started, it was reasonably successful, 10, 15 restaurants signed up, etc., all of that. And then more and more people started going. And then we realized what's an amazing hook that we can have. So we preloaded the cards with some $15 US. Like one restaurant gave $1, one restaurant gave $2, so we said, you just sign up for this card and you get $15.
You don't have to top up the card.
Without topping up the card, but fine. At the place you get cookies, the cookies cost $5, the card has only $1. If you want the cookie to put in $4. But as a hook, it's $15 free card for food, right?
Yeah.
And this went viral, and at some point, we had 1/4 of our college campus on the card. And so
I'm not surprised.
That experience of like putting posters, figuring out marketing plan, engaging with restaurants, engaging with students, doing different activations, like signing up not just local restaurants, but like a Whole Foods and a Starbucks and a Blue State Coffee. And that experience was really, really meaningful. So I think other than this experience, I also did 3 internships at different brands, trained my mind to understand a few of those things. And then I was very clear I wanted to come back to India. I didn't want to stay in the US after my undergrad.
But why didn't you want to stay?
I had a great time in the US. I went to an awesome college where I had great fun.
Yeah.
Like other than academics, and it was a great, it's an Ivy League college and I did well.
The group of people and everything.
Just an amazing group of people, great exposure, amazing environment to live. And so I started loving my life there. And then I started thinking to myself, look, life in India is different. I wouldn't say it's better or worse, but it's different from life in the US. And so if I stayed in the US for 4 years, then did 2-3 years of work, then did an MBA, and then came back to it would be 10 years outside of India. And so I would be too disconnected from life in India. Now I knew very clearly I'm very patriotic. I wear this band with the Indian flag on my hand. I've been wearing it for the last 13 years. And so I thought to myself, if I want to come back to India, there's no point living another 6 years, 7 years outside, because I need to learn how to work in India, live in India, do everything in India. And so if I want to come back to India, I might as well come back now.
Yeah.
And thinking back, that's the best decision I made. Because I had a lot of friends who did 2 years, 3 years, 1 year there.
Yeah.
But like, if
then it becomes hard for you to adjust also.
Forget hard for you to adjust. Anyways, coming back here. 1, 2, 3 saal karke kya? But yes, 10 years out, very hard to adjust.
Yeah.
Very hard to adjust. So I knew my life is here.
But why were you so, like, what made you so patriotic? Like, I'm very curious about that. Because
I think
I don't know if young generation today has that in them. I don't know.
So the India I grew up in, it wasn't so much. The India I grew up in the 90s, and I'm a kid of the 90s.
Yes,
that India had not so much pride in being Indian as much as it is today. But it's also because our country was in a different place. Economically, we were progressing in a different way. And so I remember at that time, like buying Indian brands was also not something we'd like to do. We went to stores and we got imported products because that time what was considered imported was good.
Right.
Abhi, if you go to a store, like we ask, is it an Indian brand? Is it made in India? We want to go for Indian brands. So I grew up in a different kind of India. I think for me, patriotism started with cricket. I was a huge cricket fan by the time I was 6, 7 years old, and that sparked the patriotism in me. Obviously, a lot of other things, right? And I think then going abroad, I actually, like I remember I had an Indian flag in my room in college. When I ran the half marathon in Providence, I ran an India cricket jersey.
Oh, wow.
So I think going abroad, you realize what your country has to offer. And then I came back to India at a very interesting time. I came back in 2013. 2013 wasn't a great year for India, but I think from 2014, government change, specifically for me, Ministry of Ayush was created. There's a feeling towards pride of being Indian. I was working in a private equity fund that invested in some Indian brands. I got the good fortune of working in Fab India. That was one of our investee companies. Saw that brand actually being a brand of India being built. And I think all of these things help sort of spark that curiosity in me.
Interesting, very interesting. Talk to me about, like, now that you mentioned about the Ministry of Ayush and everything. So what was your first thing you did, like, after coming back to India? Like, let's take it like step by step and like, you've decided that you're going to come back and now you've come back. So where did you start?
I actually started by getting a job.
Okay.
As I said, I wanted to be in the business side of brands. That was very interesting to me. And so I remember I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it had reached the December before my graduation. I was graduating in May. And 5 months before I graduated, I had no clue and I had not known for any recruiting. Indian companies were not coming to our college campus to recruit.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be sort of applying for jobs for American companies. So I went for dinner with my dad's friend and my dad. And my dad's friend happens to be an alumni of Brown, college I went to. And so he asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be in the business side of brands. I want to be in the business of brand creation. And fortunately, he just said, hey, like, is there any place you'd love to work? And I said, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy Group. Because it's one of the biggest conglomerate of brands in the world, right?
That's what I was going to ask. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's what I was going to ask because you said business side of brands. So, I was going to ask, did you ever consider taking up luxury management as a course? Because, I think that, honestly, that's just luxury, but like just they
So I never thought about taking it as a course. I read a lot about it. I learned a lot about it because my family business is also in luxury. My dad, my mom, my brother, they run a business now in luxury. So I was exposed to it a lot. I did internships at a luxury watch brand, at a luxury jewelry business while I was in college. And then he said, hey, I know that they have a private equity fund or an investing fund called L Capital, and one of my friends works there, so I can just loop you in with him and maybe he can help you. And so I interviewed there in their Paris office. They said, look, we are obviously excited by your profile, but we're not sponsoring an Indian's visa to come to France. So
French people don't give a damn.
He said, we're not sponsoring an Indian visa to come to France. It's too complicated for us. So we have an office in Singapore. That's a head office for Asia. We'll connect you there. So I got connected to the office in Asia. And they were happy to take me on. So they gave me an option to work in Singapore, Hong Kong or Bombay. And then my parents were like, if you're coming all the way to Asia, you better come to Bombay. And I was hesitant. I wanted to go to the head office in Singapore. But then I think my mom sort of convinced me. And I think that was a very, very important decision for me to come back to India at that time. So I worked for 3 years in this private equity fund, investing in consumer, Fab India, Genesis Luxury, which represents sort of Michael Kors, Jimmy Choo, Paul Smith, Canali, Etro, Tomy at that time, now it's part of Reliance. And then we invested in PVR, the cinema chain. And through that 3 years, I got to obviously work on one investment, which is a luxury dates business called Batil. But also like meet some of the best entrepreneurs in India across cars, bikes, apparel, lifestyle, retail, food, beverage, wine, spirit, timeware, jewelry. And as a 21 to 24-year-old, that exposure of meeting India's best consumer sector entrepreneurs was an invaluable experience for me.
Definitely.
I think after a while, I started feeling that like I'm an analyst at this fund. I'm meeting businesses doing more than 100 CR, very profitable, run by the best entrepreneurs in the country. Like, who am I to tell them what to do, right? And so I started feeling this imposter syndrome, like, I'm just an analyst in a fund and the money is somebody else's money and I'm like representing their money, etc. So what am I doing here, right? And so I said, okay, my next step should be either to work at more early stage investments, where you're actually much earlier on, you're helping build a company, or then start a company of my own. So I interviewed at a very famous early stage fund, and they said, look, you seem like you're more of an entrepreneur type, so why don't you, if you don't have an idea, why don't you go and work at some of our startups? Some of the companies that we have invested in. And at that time, they connected me to Cred, to Bira, and to Car Dekho. And this is 2015 I'm talking about.
Emerging.
Yeah, that time they were still not such big companies, right? And then, I think at some point through that journey, I decided I wanted to start. The business I started actually had a lot to do with my family and my childhood in my life. So my family's been Ayurveda for 150 years, and I was cured of asthma using my dada's formulations. And so I remember transcribing our family formulations from scriptures to the computer on my dada's laptop on Excel. And I promised him before I went to college, at some point I'll do something with the legacy. So my dada passed with this rich Ayurveda legacy, all of these formulations, products, and a sort of personal promise I'd made him. So I quit my job and I said, okay, I'll take this on and I'm going to create a Ayurveda brand that appeals to modern consumers. I think the good part for me also was my experience in the US actually shaped the way I thought. I said, look, yoga is a global phenomenon now. There are yoga mats, yoga gyms, yoga apparel, Lululemon, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in the US. And Indian companies have nothing to do with it. So as Indian companies, we need to repackage Ayurveda so the same doesn't happen to us and make it appealing and accessible to modern consumers.
Right.
And that was the thought process behind Dr. Vaidya's.
Yeah. Talk to me about, if you don't mind me asking, like Dr. Vaidya's was established, I think, in 1978 by,
Much before.
Much
that.
before? Okay.
So Dr. Vaidya's actually it's my dada's name. Our family's legacy is 150 years in Ayurveda.
Okay.
But the legacy of the business was zero. My dada ran an Ayurvedic clinic, which he inherited from his father.
Okay.
In sort of in the early 70s. He became a sort of Ayurvedic doctor in the 50s. He made a private limited company in 1978. That is Herbalab India Private Limited. But the clinic and the sort of legacy of Ayurveda much predates the creation of the company.
Okay, so like you said, you wanted to revive that and you did. But how did you do that?
Yeah, so I think...
Because there are so many kids now also who are studying abroad, who have family businesses.
Who want to come back and...
Who probably, if they feel like, oh, if we had an opportunity or if we had something to, play around with, work around with, we might consider it. So how did you do that? Because I think, and so many kids probably have the same story as you. Parents who are like, have this whole business set up and now maybe the business, they need to revive it, or maybe it's like they need someone to take care of it or something. So how did you navigate through it? How did you do it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And honestly, the legacy of our business was not a business. So I think that was a sort of blank slate which I got, which maybe a lot of folks who don't have family business, who have family businesses don't get.
Right.
So my dada ran a clinic, and he was sort of a star doctor who ran that clinic. Once he was gone, honestly, it was a blank slate. There were formulations, there were products, there was a manufacturing, but that's about it. But I was clear that I valued what my dada had created. I think sometimes, a lot of times when you're looking at an old school family business, you're like, I want to change everything. No, that's not the answer. There is no point changing everything. Change what needs to be changed while keeping the core principles the same, right? So I didn't change any of the products. I changed the packaging, I changed the branding, I changed the communication, I changed the channel. I started selling online, what was sold from a clinic. So respect the legacy and then think of a way to work with the legacy. And by the way, a lot of people from my dada's team were still in the business. And the factory manager who still runs Dr. Vaidya's factory was with my dada for like 40 years before I joined, right?
Yeah.
Respect the legacy, understand the gap between the legacy and the modern consumer, bridge that gap in a new age way while still keeping the legacy intact. Yeah. That's the way to look at it.
Remembering why it was started, if you remember that, like what was the reason behind starting that in the first place and keeping that alive, then you can, do different things with it, like take it different places. Now you've you did that, you grew the company, and what happened next? Like so unexpected. Like there are so many people who nowadays get so attached to what they build that they never want to let go of it, And for you, you even had an emotional reason to stay attached, but you still decided to, take that step. So how did you do that?
So I think a large part of shaping my way of thinking was my first job. When you work in private equity and finance, you realize that there is a promoter who builds a business, but there's a difference between being a shareholder and a management team. And so what you have to do as a management team is maximize shareholder value. Now, in my company, other than our investors who eventually bought the business, there was my mom, dad, and my brother as shareholders in the business as well. So as the CEO of the business, one, it was important for me to run the business the best way, but two, it was important to maximize my family's shareholder value. And so I was running this business. I took it to become India's largest Ayurveda brand online. We got to 5,000 orders a day, 2 million transacting customers across 16,500 pin codes. But at the scale we had reached online, I felt like our online business will tap out. Right? We had 100 crores, maybe we'll go to 150 crores, 200 crores.
But what then?
The future of the business would have been offline. And we had failed massively offline, Trisha and I. We were not able to build an offline business because we didn't know offline.
Right.
There was lots of competition. We didn't have enough money. We didn't have the experience. We didn't know how to build an offline business. And so if the future of the business was offline and I wasn't able to do it, or I wasn't the right person equipped to do it, whereas my investors are 150,000 points of distribution offline with their snacks business, maybe they were better equipped to take the business forward. And so obviously the value they offered me was fair. Obviously the money they offered was very, very fair. But above that, I think it was really like I wanted to think of the best hands to give my business to. I want to think of the best place to give my business to. And I think that seemed like the right step in the next leg of the business. And so sometimes as an entrepreneur, you have to actually Detach yourself from that emotional connection, see what is best for the brand. If I love the brand and I'm attached to the brand, I also love the success of the brand. And so the success of the brand doesn't always have to do with me. Yes, I was part of it. I grew it. My dad said, you grew Dr. Vaidya's from the seed into a small plant. Now, whether it becomes the biggest tree in the world or the plant dies, it's not your destiny anymore. It's somebody else's. And so you are now going to be a silent cheerleader and customer who's going to just cheer the brand from the outside. Right. Then I took that decision.
Why did you feel like the brand, after it reached a certain point online, that it will not have, that it will only work offline? That's interesting to me.
We were the biggest brand online in Ayurveda. Right. We had grown to a certain extent. It would grow online. But the next unlock or the next opportunity for the business for massive growth was offline.
But in what way? In what sense? I'm not able to understand, like, when you say it would grow only offline from here on.
It would not grow
in what way?
Only offline from here on. At 100 crore sales, being the largest brand in Ayurveda online, you could not go to 1,000 crore sales online. There was not that depth in the market left.
Right.
We were already the largest. So our growth would not be 10x from there. If we wanted 10x growth, which all of us wanted for the business and we believe in the potential, then that next leg of growth would happen from the distribution channel.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So does it have to do with the distribution?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's not like the business will not grow online. It will grow online.
Right.
But that massive growth from 0 to 100 that we had will not be 100 to 1,000 online.
And you wanted the company to grow that much, and you didn't want to just keep
our name
it
is still on the door.
Yeah.
Every time I was at a wedding right now, one of our products was being used. It still feels like you built that, right?
Yeah. And it says so much about the people who have acquired it to give that respect where it is,
Absolutely.
where it should be given.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that says a lot about, because otherwise in today's world, things can be very transactional.
No, and I think I have so much respect for them. After I finish this conversation with you, they are opening a store in Bombay for another one of their businesses. I'll be going to their store opening.
Oh, wow. That's lovely. See, that's the thing, about businesses. It's about the relationships that you build more than because things will come and go, brands will rise and fall, but it's the relationships that will stay at the end of the day, Talk to me about from here on, now this big company has acquired your,
legacy.
Yeah, family's legacy. And so what now? Where was your mind at? What were you thinking of, and how did you decide to get into venture capital after all?
Should I answer honestly?
Yeah, very honestly.
When I sold the business, I had no idea. I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
It happened so fast. I was 29 years old. I got a pause in my life. I was like, this is going to be the best time of my life. When you think about how our schedules are so packed, we're on flights, we're doing this, we're doing that. They're like, just imagine if every time you go on a holiday for 3-4 days, you're like, just imagine if this continued for 3-4 months, right?
Yeah.
You always think the grass is green on the other side. So I was like,
now is the time.
This is going to be I'm taking table tennis classes at 2 p.m.
Wow.
I'm trying to relearn Spanish. I'm going for a jog. I'm meeting friends and staying out till 1 in the morning on dinners on the weekdays. Ye to kabhi life mein nahi kiya hai. So I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But
Now's the time
I was
to do all of that.
after 1-2 months of this, you're like, kya ho raha hai? So I started keeping myself busy. I didn't have work, so I would just help entrepreneurs pro bono. That led to, I was giving 12 hours a week to entrepreneurs pro bono. That led to eventually, after that, investing some of my money as an angel investor. I started enjoying that. And so we started getting deeply involved with the angel portfolio companies. And then I said, look, I like this. If I create one Dr. Vaidya's, can I be the enabler to thousands of Dr. Vaidya's? Thousands. Yeah. And I started teaching D2C and e-commerce. From our learning, we said, can we create a program to help someone like us from scratch build a D2C brand? And so I think that led to the creation of this program on this platform called Growth School. We have now trained more than 1,100 founders through 8-week programs in 8 cohorts on D2C and e-commerce. And then I started saying that this sort of needs to be done in a more structured, organized way. And so I got connected to this fund called Invest, one of the best consumer funds in the world, investing for the last 25 years in India for the last 10 plus years. And they said they wanted to start an early stage investing business with an ex-entrepreneur. And they were looking for someone who's built and sold a consumer business, who's below the age of 40 to do this. And it just seemed like it was the right fit. So I got to know them over the next 3-4 months. I never thought I'd become a VC.
Yeah.
But I got to know them in the next 3-4 months. They were a great set of people, great culture, values were aligned. And so I said, okay, this makes sense. They invited me to their offsite in Spain in October 2021. I went for the offsite. I met all the people in their team and I said, this makes sense. So in December 21, I pitched to their board what I was planning to do. And that's when we started the business.
Lovely. Just for a second, for anybody, and by anybody I mean me, that who doesn't know what is venture capital, like what do venture capitalists do, and what is angel investing, and if you can briefly like talk about that.
Very simply what this is, right?
Yeah.
So angel investing or venture capital is sort of looking at the same world or realm of startups and providing capital or money as an investment to these startups to be able to grow, right? Now, there's two ways to build a business. One is bootstrap, like my dad has all his life, never took money from anybody else, owns 100% equity in the company, builds the business for himself, owns the shareholding between him and his sister completely, and they build for themselves. Right? The other way to do it is the way I did it, which is I took the business to 30-40 lakhs a month, and then I raised some money from outside, gave some shareholding in my company, used that money to hyperscale my business 20 times in 18 months, and then eventually in 21 months I sold the business, right? Now, angel investors are usually private individuals who are reasonably wealthy and have some capital of their additional to invest, right? This means the decision-making thought process is all theirs personally.
Right.
If I make a 5 lakh investment in a company, I think about it, I meet the company, I do 2-3 calls, and then I figure out whether I want to make the investment.
Yeah, it's a personal thing.
But the money is also yours. The capital is usually yours, right? And there's a new class of investment called angel syndicates where a bunch of angels come together in a pool to invest. Instead of 5 lakhs, 20 people invest 5 lakhs, and then becomes 1 crore.
Yeah.
And someone's in charge of the investment, the syndicate sourcing the deal, and they get some share of the profit.
Yeah.
What VCs do is they have what's called limited partners or investors. So, like you invest in a company, a VC raises a fund which has multiple investors, 10, 20, 100, 200, 500.
So this
whatever.
person will reach out to potential
people
who will willing to invest.
It's like investing in a mutual fund, right? If you invest in a mutual fund, this is a different asset class or much riskier asset class, but basically people come together to create this corpus which is run by a fund manager. And that fund manager, instead of investing his own personal money, invests the money of all of these people come together in the fund. That fund manager is also incentivized on a share of the profit.
Right.
So above a certain rate, any profit, the fund manager gets a share of the profit. So that's what a VC is.
Does.
Fundamentally investing in the same class of companies, which is startups, but in different ways.
Different way. Interesting. So what was your mindset like after you signed up with, Venture World Invest? What are the things that what are the brands that you were looking to invest in, personally? And where did you see the venture capital ecosystem going? Like, which way do you think if somebody sitting somewhere is thinking, I want to start a business, and there's funding out there available, how you are working, and there are so many people who are there to give funds and everything. But what to pick, like what deciding that, what do we start a business in? Like if somebody who has not started a business yet, but will start, what do you think, which industry should they start a business in at this point, being a venture capital, do you think will work the best?
Yeah, look, I think for me, I built a consumer business. And so the fund that I became a part of is also a consumer focused fund. So we invest largely in consumer. That includes brands, tech, enablers and platforms, but largely in the B2C space.
Yeah.
I don't know as much about other spaces, so I'll talk about the B2C space. I think we've made some interesting investments. Invested in a company called Coco FM, which is now very famous. It's a regional language podcast company. 3 million paid subscribers. They've done 2 rounds after we've invested. And really like deeply engaged consumer set in the vernacular audience. We've also done a business called Entry in the job upskilling space. So think about regional language, sort of career improvement.
Right.
We've done an ice cream business called Go Zero. We've done a QSR business, Bangalore-based, called Dil Foods. So varied sort of investments. And consumer still remains to be the area that I am most interested in, the most sort of excited about investing in, because it's where I've built. Right? Obviously, I invest across spaces, but I think anything consumer facing, I think India is a brand starved nation. And so if I talk about where I would advise people to start businesses in, I think there are some gaps in the consumer market now. Home and kitchen is a big gap. Personal care is a huge market, but I think it's a bit crowded.
Yeah.
So if you can find something,
it's
if you
growing
can find
now.
something unique, health and wellness, sort of unique products, well researched. Pets is a growing space in our country as well.
Pets.
So I think that space, and then there is a
Even
culture,
elderly people, getting healthcare for elderly.
geriatric care, and then there's a
geriatric
new sort of wave of sports and fitness, which I think in the long term will be very big in our country.
Yeah.
So I would say businesses in these spaces could be interesting.
I think this will be very helpful for somebody watching. What advice would you give to someone who is starting out and they are confused about the process, like how to go about it. Like they've made up their mind, like what are they curious about, and they're confused about how to go about the process. Should they go get fund outside initially, or should they like just keep it bootstrapped? Like what is the best strategy to start with, once you've decided that this is the space you want to enter into?
So look, I think the question is very interesting. I would say let's leave aside funding completely, right? The best way to start, according to me, is start. Because if you don't start, you're building these amazing PowerPoints and Excel sheets and philosophizing. I think the best fiction stories are written on Excel. Until you start, you engage with a customer. A customer is paying for your product, not just sampling your product, getting feedback on your product. Until you do that, nothing really starts, right? So forget the funding, forget the world around you. Just start the business, engage with customers, and you will get your answers.
Right.
As opposed to the customer calls, the Excel sheets,
and
talking
just
to 100 people.
speculating in your head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the best way to start is to start.
I agree. I've done the same thing with this podcast. One day randomly it just clicked to me that maybe I should do it, because like I was watching a lot of podcasts during lockdown, and I wanted to like start my own like pharma. I'd registered my own pharma company, but it was lockdown, so I couldn't like make new formulations, go into the lab and do all of that stuff, and I didn't want to get into like generic, like what everyone else was doing, like the job work and put a brand name and put it out. I didn't want to do that. So, and I used to watch a lot of podcasts, and I was like, maybe, what am I doing? I'm wasting time. But then I was like, okay, like one day I was like, maybe I should give this a try.
Just go for it.
I mean, why not? And then I just started. Like within 15 days of me thinking that maybe I should do it, and I contemplated everything. The most biggest thing was that I'm a very sensitive person. So doing this and me becoming this and putting this out there was like the scariest thing for me.
Well, when you started, it all felt different.
So the point that I was going to make from this is that I also learned by doing it.
Until you didn't start.
And I say this to people, like when somebody asked me on a Q&A on my page that, like what do I do? What is the niche? They asked me what is the niche I should get into. And I was like, just do it. Like just start. Whatever it is, just start, because you will learn by doing.
Absolutely.
You will watch videos, you will read books, but actually you will learn by doing. And there's no other replacement for that. Yeah, I agree. Talk to me about like, one of the biggest things that is overlooked when it comes to the startup space, and it's very glamorized now, especially it's very like, publicized now basically. But there's a different side to it as well, which is like, emotionally it takes a toll on you as people, as families.
This is not talked about enough.
Exactly.
The emotional roller coaster that a startup is, the amount of sort of struggle there is, how hard it is, and how much failure you have to undergo. You learn a lot about yourself, about your great resilience, your ability to fight when you're running a startup. And I think, look, obviously only success stories are told in public, in news, etc., all of that. But I think you talk about also how difficult it was. The first 2.5 years of Dr. Vaidya was not smooth sailing. Everybody says, oh, you made this great success, you had this exit, etc. But no, it wasn't easy. A lot of struggle, a lot of strife.
Yeah. Because I feel like, people talk about like, first I don't like to call it mental health, because what is mental? There's no organ in our body, like it should be brain health. Because there's a lot of talk around that. I mean, how do you think one can navigate that as well? Because sometimes it's not just one person. Sometimes it's the entire family also with you, going with you through that journey.
Yeah. I think you also need to have a very supportive infrastructure and support system of family around you.
Right.
Who understands what you're going through.
Right.
Who understands that sometimes at dinner when you don't want to talk, you don't want to talk. Right? And you're not going to be able to say my day was great because it wasn't great. And I think I was lucky to have that. My dad's an entrepreneur. My mom's seen him, and I think they were very supportive as well. My grandmom saw my granddad, and so even though he wasn't around, she saw the journey as well. So I think you're lucky to have a very supportive family. It's important. Whether it's family, friends, partner, advisor, mentor, you need someone.
And that's why, taking from that, we'll move to like the mentorship that you're doing, with your course and everything. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the reason for doing it was very clear. I had not so many people from the industry who were able to tell me real stuff that was not gyan. Like we educate our founders through the program about how to list on Amazon, how to set up your warehouse, how to make a conversion-friendly website, what is e-commerce-based SEO, how do you scale performance marketing, what is a retention funnel, how do you get customers back, how do you build the right team when you're building a D2C brand. I think all of these things are not talked about enough. What you see is usually a generalized conversation, So we take them in batches of 125 to 150. We spend 8 weeks with them. We do weekly Q&A for 2 hours. We ask them to talk about their own businesses. I think that was lacking in the market. We really enjoy doing it, but also we see founders getting value from it as well.
Right. Interesting. I hope we'll put the details in the description about the program that you're running, and hopefully many people can sign up for it and, learn and start their startup journey with you guys. Now we'll move to a little bit more fun segment, which is called Curious Quick 5. Sure. So I'll ask you these quick questions that, that you recently think about or something. What's the one thing that you're curious about recently, apart from startups and all of that?
I think everyone is curious about AI.
Okay.
Everyone is.
Okay.
How can it become a part of our lives without replacing humans?
I think it's going to replace, I feel. I'm on Elon Musk's side when it comes to thinking about AI.
Where it goes is
I'm very skeptical. Not skeptical, I'm very what do you call it? I'm very scared or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm on that side.
I'm curious. Let's see where AI goes.
I to feel like I know, whatever.
There are a lot of applications already. I'm using it a lot in my life. But where it goes from here, I'm curious to see.
Yeah. Interesting. What's the one person that you're curious about, living or dead? Could be anyone.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
I think he built a way of doing business which seems so normal and so right today, but when he did it, was a completely different time. So how do you build as a visionary, but still build a strong business with it? Sometimes you see a dissonance between the two, right? Someone was ahead of their time. And so 20 years later it became good, but they didn't get to see it. He saw both together.
I think again in that part, one small thing to add to that is not talked about a lot, is spirituality played a big role in that.
For him it did.
And people don't talk about it, and people don't know this also.
He used to come to India.
Yeah. He got the idea for the logo from a temple in India. What I mean to say is that to get that level of success, it has to come from something bigger than you. Correct. It's not just you. Correct. And I think that's not talked about a lot. People, and I'm sure, I don't know if, do you guys address about these things in your program or something?
I mean, it's not something that we would talk about.
Yeah.
Because each to his own.
Right.
It's something I believe in.
One place you're curious to travel to?
Greece. We've had 3 trips cancelled to Greece. We did do a friend's wedding in Athens.
Okay.
But I didn't see enough. We were just there for 3 days. So Greece is where I want to go next.
Interesting that you say that. When we were connecting on Instagram and talking about planning this, I was taking my flight to Greece.
Oh, wow.
So I was just, I spent a week there in October, and it was amazing,
Awesome.
Athens, I didn't like that much.
We didn't get to see anything else, so we want to see more.
Yeah, you should. It's nice. Mykonos is good. I didn't go anywhere else apart from Athens and Mykonos, but Greece is good. One book or author you're curious about?
I like Seth Godin's writing. Purple Cow, a marketing book that he's written, is something that stayed with me because I'm a marketing branding guy.
Yeah.
So Seth Godin for sure.
Okay, nice. One technology that you're curious about, you already answered, which I was going to say. The last question you answered in the first question. So it couldn't be a better full circle. So we've reached the end of our conversation with you. Any last thoughts that you would like to share? How was your experience?
No, I loved the conversation. Truly talked about things that I haven't spoken about before, and I hope this can spark the curiosity of so many other listeners who can listen to. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you for taking the time and being
pleasure.
here. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.